to help me do this. All right, so going over lab equipment. All right, I'm showing you this because this is actually what you will see, and you can ask me to move these boxes. They're kind of movable here. I'm showing you this because this is what you'll see on your quiz tomorrow, and sometimes this doesn't look the same as this on a piece of paper, but of course that's the nature of the quiz. So right here, this is this piece of equipment, all right, and this right here is not a kitchen measuring cup at all. It's kind of similar to a kitchen measuring cup, but in the lab it has another name. Bria, what do you call this piece of equipment? That is called a beaker. Very good. All right. All right, that is a beaker. Now, a beaker can be used, what is the, Maddie, unit of measurement? This ml, what does that stand for?
Milliliters.
Milliliters, very good. All right, this beaker isn't a very accurate piece of measuring equipment. All right, I can measure up to 50, 100, all the way up to 200 milliliters, but it's not very accurate. All right, there's another piece of equipment on here, and I want you to, on this, tell me what piece of equipment you think is more accurate for a measuring device. There's a couple things you might point to. Let's see, Mackenzie, what do you think? Give me a letter here.
J.
J. She got it right. Okay, J, very good. Now I was thinking somebody might say I, and we'll talk about I, but J right here, all right, looking at this piece of equipment, all right, I like this one because it's plastic, it doesn't break. Well, it can break, but it's not as breakable and not as dangerous as the beakers. All right, what is this piece of equipment here called, guys? Graduated cylinder. Very good. Now, graduated. Why the word graduated? All right, did this guy go to high school and graduate and go off and become a college student? Possibly. No, these right here, these little markings, and it's hard to see on this one because of the plastic, but let's say between this 20 and this 30, you see that there's marks for 21, 22, 23, etc., right? Those markings are also called graduations. Graduation meaning you're moving up a step, okay? So, like on this ruler, the graduations, you can have graduations in these millimeters, or of course in the inches, which we don't like to use in science, but the graduations just mean the steps, and of course they're equal in distance from one another. All right, so that graduated cylinder we use for an accurate volume measurement. All right, now since we're talking about measuring, what type of substance can you measure in this? Solids, liquids, gases? Liquids. All right. Now you can certainly put solids in here, right? And if it was something like sand, could you kind of get an estimate of 100 milliliters of sand? You could, right? Now, why would that not work as well for, let's say, marbles? If you fill marbles up to here, why would you not really have 100 milliliters of just marbles?
They take up more space.
Yeah, there's going to be empty space between those marbles, isn't there? Okay, now if you crushed those marbles in a big crusher and ground them down to where they looked like probably colored sand, all right, then you'd have a more accurate measurement. But we can certainly you may be asked to get a beaker full of marbles, right? But now what we don't measure in here, of course, is gases. All right, so now let's go back to this one, this piece of equipment right here. Charles, what is this called? Do you know what this is? It's letter I here. It's a flask. Now, there are actually different types of flasks. This flask is named after a scientist named Erlenmeyer, okay? So, an Erlenmeyer flask, all right? Oh, have you all ever heard of a Bunsen burner? I found this interesting when I read this last summer. There's a man named Dr. Robert Bunsen, and of course he worked on the Bunsen burner. So a lot of these things are named after important people who did work on this. Now, a flask, why would a flask be, this is a tough one for you guys, but flask versus a beaker. When would a flask be more appropriate than a beaker?
With chemicals.
Okay, let's say that I ask you to make a salt water solution. I give you some salt, I give you some water, and what do you need to make the salt and water become a solution?
Mix it.
Mix it. You could heat it, okay? Both of these can go and be heated, all right? Which one of these swirls better?
A flask.
The flask, okay? So this flask is actually very good for making solutions because you can swirl it, okay? So you can swirl it and make solutions with it, okay? I told you my arm is sore. I'm still not very good at writing right now, but I'm kind of writing as little as possible. But you can swirl this, you can make solutions, and of course you can heat it like you could a beaker. All right, so this goes along with your Erlenmeyer flask. This piece of equipment right here, which is letter B, you might find in your garage. You might find it in your kitchen cabinet. All right? This is called a funnel. What do you use it for if you're working on your car, if it's in the garage? Yes, to do an oil change. All right? To do an oil change. All right? Now, let's say that we're making a salt water solution. What's the purpose of using this to make the salt water solution here instead of just pouring the salt into here? Yeah, it's just going to make it, it's going to make sure you get, it's just going to make it neater, and you'll probably have less chance of spilling any salt that you've carefully measured out, because this is kind of a tiny little opening here relative to this beaker, okay? All right, next, let's talk about these guys. One's clean, one's dirty. What are these important, Danielle, pieces of equipment called? Yes, tubes is the second part of the word. Charles, vials are different. You know, vial is kind of a generic word for a container almost, but there are little, you know, like you go to the pharmacy and they give you a vial of medicine, like a little, the little bottle of medicine, a vial. Couldn't you call that a vial? Also a little smaller, yeah. Vial is the word in question. No, you're not right at all. Yes, you are somewhat right. What is a vial? We need to find that out. Maybe when we're at lunch, we will think about what a vial is. But vials, you know, I've got a couple of pieces of equipment that we might call a vial later. Let's get back to that. Okay, now, this is a great way to manage your test tubes. What do you think we might call this piece of equipment?
Test tube holder.
Test tube holder or a test tube rack? Either one, okay? Rack or holder. I honestly don't know what it's going to be called on that quiz tomorrow. But you know what? You guys look pretty smart, and you could probably figure out what it is, okay? Now, this thing right here. Did you ever use one of these and they come in like this white porcelain, they look like this. How many little, these are called wells, these little doodads here. How many wells are there? 1, 2, 3, 4 times 6. Who already did my math? Thank you, Chase. All right, 24. You could do 24 little tiny experiments in here, couldn't you? And just have one piece of equipment that gets dirty versus 24 test tubes, which would require 2 of these. A lot of dishwashing, right? So this thing right here can be called a micro well plate, or it can be called a micro well tray, or it can be called a micro titration plate, or a micro titration plate or tray as well. Okay, the key word is micro. What does micro represent? Mini, small. Okay, so we're doing small experiments, which is more green. What do I mean by more green?
Like environment.
More environmentally safe, okay? Environmentally friendly, meaning we're using less chemicals when we do this type of a lab, okay? All right, this good old guy you probably learned when you were in pre-K. What is this thing? Ruler. We like to measure in centimeters and millimeters and meters, right? All right. These guys are our safety goggles. People usually spell them Googles. I don't know what it is. People just want to write Googles, but they're safety goggles. Now, these are the kind of goggles that if you were wearing contact lenses, would be safer than the type that are more like sunglasses with a little extra protection, okay, or your welding glasses. All right, letter G. These guys are, it's kind of like a dropper, but it has a fancy name. It starts with a P, and we probably talked about this yesterday when we went over our safety. Pipette, very good. Pipette can be spelled 2 different ways. All right, but this is a pipette, and these are plastic. We usually dispose of them, and this particular one actually has measurements on the side of it, okay? So I think it says 1, 2, 3, and 4 milliliters. So there are markings. What's the other word for a marking that we just talked about? Graduation. So those would be graduations, okay? All right, what does this say? Metric ruler, pipette. Oh, those are the, so that looks like one of your answers, one of your choices that you would match up with G on your quiz tomorrow. So pipette's going to be spelled like that. Now this is thermometer. And what's our favorite measuring unit in science? For temperature. For temperature, I'm sorry. Celsius. There's also something called Kelvin, okay? What does the weatherman tell us? Fahrenheit. That's what we use for our weather. And you can, even as a scientist, I, of course, love to measure things in Celsius, right, Miss Sullivan? But when my car thermometer gives me the temperature reading in Celsius, I don't know what they're talking about, you know, because we're just used to the Fahrenheit scale. So, yes, I can do a conversion, but in everyday life, we do still talk in Fahrenheit, unlike European countries where they are in Celsius. This right here, imagine, is plugged into the wall, and it is really, really hot. This is, it kind of replaces the Bunsen burner because we're not using an actual flame. It's simply a hot plate. All right, excellent. Hot plate, and those are hot. All right, now, M has a very fancy name. It's got a 3-word name.
A triple beam bell.
There are 3 beams there. That's not our bell. That's the bell we didn't hear yesterday. It's like our warning bell. Okay, that's the triple beam balance. And what unit do we love to measure in this class? Grams. Very good. Grams. Okay. And if I tell you something is something, let's say a medicine weighs such and such micrograms, is the microgram a very large or a very small amount? It's a very small because we talked about micro being small. Okay. So what's on your quiz tomorrow? All of this equipment. All right. With these pictures. It's going to be posted on Edmodo. Yes, let's see, here we go. All right, there you go, guys. That's what you're going to have tomorrow on your quiz.